Today is October 11th, 2007. I've lived in Murrieta. Well, actually, I was born in Hemet, but I was born to my family that lived here in 1964, and I'm 43 years old. Some of my favorite memories of Murrieta was here as a 4-H'er. The 4-H group here was Murrieta Lifewires, and we would have our meetings at the local church that were, I believe it was a Presbyterian church on the corner of Calamia and Adams. My mom was the 4-H leader, and we did a lot of things downtown. We would have, other than, of course, we had a lot of large animal projects, dairy replacement, heifers and such. We also would go around town and we would gather weeds, and then we'd put them in the community center that was on Juniper, and the kids would go through and we would have to name what type of each weed was, and give the actual names to them. And some of my other favorite memories were at the Murrieta Market. I remember being there I was about 3 years old, and I remember squatting down in front of the candy aisle while my mom was trying to buy some groceries and trying to find a Tootsie Roll, Tootsie Pop to get out of there, figure out which flavor was the best. But I remember coming, because I actually didn't live in downtown Murrieta. I live in French Valley.
Oh, okay.
But my address is Murrieta, so it was part of the original township of Murrieta. I believe it's township number 7 in Riverside County, because this actually used to be San Diego County. And my great-grandparents moved here, or actually my great-grandfather moved here in the 1880s, approximately 1886, and they bought a piece of property which was also considered Murrieta, it's called Bachelor Mountain. He and a man by the name of Alexander Vial, and they apparently were mining the iron off the top of the mountain. And underneath iron caps you'll often find gold. And in doing so, he ended up buying a lot of property with a man by the name of Jose Jensen as his partner at the time. Who, by the way, so it's kind of simple, but I know in Riverside County they've never had anybody able to transcribe his name in the list of the original people in Riverside County, but I do know that he was my great-grandfather's partner because they owned property together. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. I'd like to be able to get in there and figure that out. But, and then he ended up buying a bunch of springs. He bought the Santa Gertrudis Spring, which they actually called, or was renamed Alaca de Media, and the Adobe Springs on Warm Springs Creek. The other spring is on Chocolata Creek. And but he was a large, I'm sorry, he's such a stuttery person. He did dryland farming, wheat, barley, oats. We farmed about 10,000 acres out here. He met my great-grandmother through her brother, who is William Kramer, where like Kramer Boulevard is in Anaheim. Anyway, he met Bill Kramer at Murrieta Hot Springs, and they would gamble there. And they both all spoke French, and he introduced him to his sister-in-law. And they ended up getting married. He sent for her 3 months later, and then they came back and married in I think it was Anaheim where they got married, and I actually lived in their house. It's kind of an interesting fact. But we farmed about 10,000 acres. It was small at first, and then it grew to be, after generations, my father's generation, it was 10,000 acres. We farmed a lot of property for the Blackmore family that is now like Alta Murrieta, and we farmed all the area that's now, well, not Alta Murrieta, but the Blackmore property was the California Oaks area. And then the Alta Murrieta property was leased land that we farmed to. So we farmed from Lake Skinner to about Baxter Road, dryland farming, wheat, barley, oats. We had a couple of years. The soils out here are wonderful in the fact that they're heavy in the loam and their clay, and they produced seed oats or seed barley. Actually, it was seed barley 2 different times, which is a really high classification for the grain content, meaning that the soils out here were so nutritional, that the seed was so good that it wouldn't be used for bread, that it would be used for seed across the nation. So it was a big deal.
It wouldn't be used for grain, it would be used for harvest or propagation.
It would be because it was so strong and hardy, and plus it didn't have a lot of other weeds in it. That the seed that the farmers would use it rather than lower it. Most people, when they think of Murrieta, they think of all of the newer development, and they don't think of downtown. And we refer to it as downtown because when we became a city and the development was all on the other side, and it was mostly voted into by the newcomers, we didn't want to. We were downtown. We were what Murrieta was, even though my family lived so far away. It was still, you had to come, when you came to town, you went down in elevation, and you came to what's, Washington and Ivy, which at the time were Highway 395, Farm to Market roads. And there was, way before I was born, there was the mill that was over at the train depot that was next to the Fountain House. And we would bring all of our grain to the mills, and then the mill would put it in the train, and they would take the train to Corona, and they would catch another train, and it would be sent to market that way. Is that thinking? Okay. But let's see, in like 1975 or 76 in there, they put in the 15 freeway and the 215. They were supposed to, one of them, I can't remember which one it was supposed to be temporary. So the 395, which was actually Washington, and it was from the north. It would have come in from Elsinore, and it was Washington Avenue, and it made a curve onto Jefferson. There was no stop sign there. There weren't any stop signs on it at all. And then it would curve into Ivy, and then it would make a curve to the south into Jefferson, and that was Highway 395. And we didn't have like the freeway overcrossings. We had these hanging lights that would flash in red, just flash red, or they'd flash yellow for you to be cautious and go back over the freeway.
So how is the highway change development? Do you think it pushed development away from the actual?
Absolutely, yeah. It took away. I own a bar in Murrieta, in downtown Murrieta, and I'm going to stress the downtown part because it's kind of our thing down here to make sure that we were called Old Town, because we weren't old. This was, we used to have a court downtown, and the United States Department of Agriculture building was downtown, and the water department's buildings were here, and it was almost an insult to call us Old Town. So it's kind of a big deal to make sure that it gets called downtown. Anyway, yes, when they put in the freeways, people completely bypassed Murrieta. And then, because, like I was saying, I own a bar, people go, we didn't even know there was anything on the other side of the freeway. And plus, it's lower in elevation, and you can't really see that there are buildings over here. It's a unique situation in that sense. But it also kept the people who lived over here very close, very clannish, because we had, it's like the people of my generation were raised by people who had this thing about standing up for what you believe in. And I don't know if that came from like the misspelling of Murrieta and the 1 T to 2 T's. Obviously it's correctly spelled with 1 T, but it was almost 30 years from 1885 to 1924 that we struggled to have the spelling of Murrieta made with just the 1 T, because we weren't named after the Bandito we were named after Juan Murrieta.
Okay, yes, yes.
And Juan Murrieta, what an interesting character in the sense that he was the person that the United States Department of Agriculture recognizes as bringing avocados to the United States. Yeah.
He's a man.
And of course, there's a brand of avocados called Murrieta that's part of the Haas brand. But he was a horticulturist as well, so he was big into tropical plants and such. But that was part of the naming of the streets in Murrieta. If you look at the naming of the streets that go from east to west, that run east to west, you have, well, anymore, the first one you have is cherry. I believe the first one may have been avocado, but it goes cherry, date, fig. They're all listed alphabetically until you get to downtown, where it's juniper, and juniper is the center of downtown. And they're all a half a mile apart, except for the ones on either side of juniper, which are ivy and calamia, which are only a quarter mile apart. Designating where downtown actually was. I always found that was like really interesting, but it was because of his horticultural love that those streets were named after plants and plant life. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Do you remember anything about when you guys decided to incorporate as a city? Thing. I know there was a fight against that. So
just because so much of it was, it's not the negative aspect of it, because it was actually some people who had lived in the area for a long time that thought that we needed to incorporate. But we needed to incorporate because Temecula was taking us over. That's how we lost the A and the B of the two plant lives that we had that were part of Murrieta, because Temecula said that was their area. And because the people who were so new as the city managers and stuff didn't know the history of Murrieta, they allowed those two blocks to go to Temecula rather than to stand up for them. And I think it really became an insult to the people who had lived here for so long to have part of our area be taken over by Temecula, because the people who were doing their job, unfortunately, were ignorant to what really was about downtown, because they weren't
incorporating the citizens or asking people that lived here.
Well, they argued with us on a continual basis. They would come in and they were putting up stop signs where we didn't have stop signs or need stop signs, and I believe that most of the people in town thought that was more about generating an income for them.
Turn people away from certain areas, maybe?
No, it was more about, if they have a police department, they have to have a reason to give them a ticket so they can make money. And if there's no stop signs, they can't even write you a ticket for running a stop sign. So it was like it was more about and they came in and they repaved the streets and were putting delineations about the direction in which we could park. And when we were parking in a diagonal before, they were insisting that we couldn't. And the property owners and the people who had lived here forever, this is the way we had parked. A lot of us had stock trailers behind our trucks, and you couldn't park the way they were asking you to park. You'd be out in the middle of the traffic on the road. So it became a hassle. It was, but I have to say, part of it was our fault in the fact that there weren't enough people down here that were willing to become involved in the government. But it became such a battle. It just became a battle to become a part of.
Enough people, I think, rooting for your side. You know what I'm saying? It seemed like a lot of people that didn't know about the area, that were getting into city council and things like that, were making all the decisions, and people that lived here for so long.
Well, yes, it's very true, but we also were very tight-lipped. Okay. We didn't want to talk to them.
Why so?
Because I think part of it was, I think, because years earlier in Temecula, they had started, I don't remember if it was Roy Rogers, it was some famous old cowboy, Gene Autry, that had started a museum. And we took a lot of our stuff to the museum. And he decided to close the doors and took everything with him within a matter of months. So we lost some of our historical implements and old wagons and family photos that we had thought were going to be in a museum in town. Because Temecula and Murrieta were like sister cities. Murrieta was always much, much larger. My grandfather married my grandmother, who lived in downtown Murrieta, on the corner of Ivy and First Street, and this was her town. She grew up here, and it was much larger than Temecula. Temecula had nothing, it had a market, which my grandfather owned for a while, and they had the swing in and a couple of gas stations and mostly bars. It was more where the cowboys were wild and they hung out, where Murrieta was much more, the people were more refined than the wild people that were in Temecula all the time. Anyway, that was part of the deal. I think because we had been so intruded by the people from, unfortunately my generation refers to it as from behind the orange curtain, which would have been Orange County, that they didn't like, or it was like suddenly, even though we had been more refined, we were being put down for our ways because there were horses here and people got dirty, and we didn't care if we had manure on our boots, we were kind of put down by them. And in this town, you could have millions of dollars and you'd wear a dirty, oily hat. It didn't matter. It wasn't about the money. It was about
much more your family. That air was gone. That real. It was more.
We didn't
more.
Because people weren't so judgmental about the money. The mighty dollar wasn't the major thing. It was whether you were a decent individual or not. Yeah.
The things that really matter.
Yeah. So, and that's why, a lot of the people in downtown would be so furious with the new people because we refer to them as the cityots, kind of across between city and idiot, or we refer to them as, like I said, behind the orange curtain, or plastic, because they live their life with plastic values, and they use plastic credit cards, and they wanted plastic breast implants, and their life was plastic. And, that wasn't the way the people from downtown Murrieta chose to live their lives. It'd be frustrating to be driving your tractor from one piece of property to another and have a police officer pull you over and say you can't do that anymore. I mean, you couldn't.
The demographics have changed. It was more like a horse town, cowboy town, and it changed to more like a city.
It's actually more like a farming town than a cowboy town. What people fail to seem to recognize is there is the rancher and there are his employees, and his employees are cowboys. Cowboys are wild and carefree and reckless. It's like being the rancher's children. It's kind of like being the preacher's kids. You didn't mess up. You didn't get in trouble. The cowboys got in trouble, and you look down upon that. They were the roughhousers and the drunks. And they lived in Temecula. They didn't live here.
Tell me a little bit about the ranching out here. A little bit about.
I was just a dryland farm kid, but these hills over here, they were just beautiful rolling hills, which were all of Alta Murrieta and California oaks, and we would farm that, and it would be waves of. How the song goes about the amber waves of grain, and I felt like so part of it. My dad and I would sing on the tractor, and we'd sing like My Country 'Tis of Thee and such. And I can remember, when you're farming a lot of property, our family was well off, but to be looked down upon by these people who were, in houses that they didn't own. We owned our land. These people were making payments on it.
What land did you own? All the French Valley area?
Not all of it. Most of it? About 3,000 acres. And most of the rest.
Who was your father again?
Alex Borel. And his father was, my father would be Alex A. Borel, and then my grandfather was Alex F. Borel. And my great-grandfather who moved here, originally the one that was on their own Bachelor Mountain and did all the mining, was Alexander G. Borel. And my brother Ray, of course, is Alexander Ray Borel. And I have a nephew named Alexander Jules Borel. But the Alex, so it's just for me to say that Alex, it isn't just Alex. There's a lot of Alexes to them. But yes. And my father, we didn't go to school here in town. We went to school in Los Alamos, which is, we went to school in the Alamos School District. The road, Los Alamos, was the road that took you to Alamos. And in the 1910s and stuff, it was still called Alamos. French Valley was still called Alamos at that time. But Alamos became an area that was filled with French people that lived there, the Bucks, the Searles and such, the Borels, the Pouroys, and it became known as French Valley. So like the road the Los Alamos Road in Murrieta is important because it directs people towards Alamos. And now they're shutting it off, so, and Murrieta wants to incorporate part of French Valley, which is, it's understandable. I mean, it was part of their realm, but the people who actually lived in French Valley were losing our heritage because it's being overstepped as being part of being Murrieta or being part of Temecula, which was, of course, it was a historic Mexican land grant that French Valley wasn't ever part of. But anyway, that's another subject. Yeah.
So did your father end up selling these properties?
No, we still own quite a bit of it. Still live there. I live on my great-grandparents' home.
Okay, neat. So do you continue to farm or just let it be? Or?
What's happened is it's almost impossible to farm with all these people out here. They throw their plastic bags and stuff, and you can't, grain doesn't come up through the trash. You get plastic in the dirt and, you might just get under or whatever, but it doesn't disintegrate right away, so it's very hard to farm it. We sold the property to the Riverside County for French Valley Airport, and we sold the property that is now the Southwest Justice Center, where the courthouses are. My family sold the county that property. We own both sides of Winchester Road through there. Of course, my grandfather's gone, and my father's younger brother is gone. My father's the only child left. And he recently sold, or they would be the other side of the family too, which would be my uncle's children, 80 acres, and each one of them bought property in Northern California. My father bought 8,600 acres, and my cousin's family, or my uncle's family, bought 7,600 acres on that same 80 acres that was down here.
Wow.
So the farming's really moved. But I was, up until last year, I was running 56 cattle out on the ranch. Our cattle brand is Bar, 69 Bar. And in my father's house, we have all the other cattle brands from around the area burnt into the rafters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so, we have the Dominigonis and the Thompsons and the Nicholases and Vale Ranch. So the cattle was always just they would graze on the crops after they were farmed. So it'd be, well, not the crops, but on the stubble after the grain was removed. So the cattle helped remove part of the weeds and such when you would rotate the crops and everything. So they kind of were like a little bit of like money on the side, but it was mostly just wheat, barley, and oats out here. A lot of barley.
So about school.
My area would have went to Alamos School District, a one-room school, which closed in 1970 and was bought out by Hemet School District. My father was sat on the school board for the Hemet School Board, but I didn't come to school here in Murrieta. My brother Roy was a very advanced and intelligent young man, so they actually moved him out of Alamos, and he went to the Murrieta Elementary School for a couple of years before they were bought out. But none of us went to school here. There weren't any schools here. Both my parents graduated from Elsinore High School. Of course, there weren't any high schools out here. There was just the elementary school on B Street.
Who do you think had the greatest impact on development out here? I mean, who do you think? I don't know if I answer this question. That's the question right here.
It's fair. I think the biggest impact was around 1989 when they changed. Calamia hits California Oaks Road now, but it used to be called Antelope Road. And it was nothing but farmland. There was dirt road out there. The silica mines were out there. and so that's kind of interesting stuff. The silicon mine was out there, and the kids all used it as a swimming hole.
Oh, okay.
And but then when they sucked all the water out of it, they found like 14 old cars in it, and there was the other watering hole or swimming hole that people would use would be up in Chinaha, the Chinaha Falls. People call that area Santa Rosa now. They've just changed so many of the names. So, for instance, like the Antelope Road, which is now California Oaks, when that became developed, I think that was the largest impact. And I'm not sure who the developer was of California Oaks. But
that really made an impact on the city.
Yeah, that was a huge impact on the city because they had grocery stores. The Staten Brothers on Los Alamos Road, I think, it took away from, we have a little market downtown on the corner of Washington and B, the country market that used to be owned by Kenny and Paulette Lee and a few other people that have lived down here forever. And people now refer to it as a liquor store. I mean, that was our market. I mean, that was our grocery store. If you wanted groceries, when I was a kid, you drove to Hemet, to Vaughn's. Other than, I don't know, that's probably a 5,000 square foot building is all it is. So
do you think it was a negative impact, or was it a just different impact?
I'm not going to say that it was negative, because my family was always, believed in progress. We had the very first radio in town. My house had the very first indoor toilet in the area of French Valley, and indoor plumbing. And we had a cistern originally where the well pumped water into the basement, and then you hand cranked it up into the house that I live in. It's
just changed.
It's changed. I know the first people in town that I adore that, we wish things could stay the same, but everybody wishes things could stay the same. We wish our children could stay children. We wish that you have to be able to grow with it. And I think part of what we're striving for as people from downtown, or what I recognize, is that we want the growth and the progress that our forefathers wanted when they came to this area to provide a better life for their family. But we don't want the blood, sweat, and tears that they worked so hard to get this for to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So that's what I find being the most important thing.
Well, no, I think it's good. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to add, maybe, or that you think of?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine. That's perfect. I think we're good because we got almost an hour. So.